Some stories get buried, but they refuse to stay dead. A glutton cursed with endless hunger. A ghostly woman drifting ashore in a hollow ship. Vanished inventors and royal children who may have been murdered by their own family. Tonight, we open the Midnight Ledger, the first in a series of strange and chilling histories too bizarre to forget. These are remastered stories, carefully re-edited for our new series, so you can experience them in a whole new way. Tarrare, the man who ate everything. Tarrare. Imagine a man so ravenous he could devour corks, stones, live animals, and even more disturbing things, and was still starving. Step into the disturbing world of history's most insatiable man. This is a true horror medical story. Meet Tarrare, an 18th century Frenchman whose insatiable appetite baffled doctors behind hospital walls and horrified onlookers. Was he a medical mystery, a cursed soul, or something far stranger? This isn't just the story of a man with an appetite. It's one of the most bizarre tales in human history, and you're about to find out why. Tarrare was born near Lyon, France, around 1772. From the very beginning, his appetite was monstrous. As a child, he could eat a quarter of a cow in a single day. His family couldn't afford to keep feeding him, so they kicked him out. Yes, his hunger got him thrown out of his own home. Desperate, he wandered through France as a teen, performing in the streets. Crowds would gather to watch him eat corks, stones, entire baskets of apples, rinds and all, and even live animals. Eels were his specialty. He'd crush them with his jaws and swallow them whole. People were horrified, but they couldn't look away. Tarrare's strange talents eventually landed him in a hospital. At the military hospital in Tarrare, doctors were fascinated. They gave him incredible amounts of food, and he ate it all. 4 times the rations of a normal soldier weren't enough. He could devour an entire meal in seconds and still beg for more. Physically, Tarrare was like something out of a medical horror story. His jaws stretched unnaturally wide. His teeth were yellow and rotting. He had loose hanging skin and a stomach that would balloon grotesquely when full and hang like a sack when empty. He constantly sweated and smelled so badly you could hardly be near him. One doctor said you could smell him from across the room. The doctors, trying to understand him, fed him every kind of substance: vinegar, tobacco pills, and even laudanum, an opiate. Nothing worked. His hunger couldn't be dulled. It was as if something else was eating him from the inside. Some began to wonder, was this man just sick? Or was there something truly monstrous living within him? During the war with Prussia, French officials saw a strange opportunity. What if they could use Tarrare's bizarre ability for espionage? They had him swallow a wooden box containing a secret message. If he could pass it intact, he'd be the perfect courier. And he did. The box came out the other end. Just fine, if you can call that fine. Tarrare was sent across enemy lines disguised as a German peasant. But things quickly went south. He didn't speak German, acted suspicious, and was captured. When the Prussians beat him, he confessed everything. They tied him to a toilet and waited for the box to come out. Once it did, they opened it, only to find a decoy message inside. Enraged, the Prussians nearly executed him, but instead dumped him back at the French border. Back in France, Tarrare begged doctors to cure him. He hated the curse his appetite had become. But nothing worked. His behavior grew more desperate and more disturbing. He was caught drinking the blood of other hospital patients. He'd sneak into the morgue and eat human flesh. And then, the unthinkable happened. A 14-month-old baby disappeared from the hospital. Staff immediately suspected Tarrare. No one could prove it, but the suspicion alone was enough. He was chased out and banned for life. Imagine being so tormented by your own hunger that you turn into something out of a horror film. Tarrare wasn't just hungry, he was haunted by it. His body demanded flesh, blood, anything, and no one could stop it, not even him. 4 years later, Tarrare reappeared in a hospital in Versailles. He was dying, reportedly from tuberculosis, but his final days were as grotesque as his life. His body rotted from the inside out. The smell was so horrific that even seasoned doctors refused to continue his autopsy. Still, what they saw shocked them. An abnormally large, ulcerated stomach and a body full of pus, decay, and disease. Some believed he had a massive tapeworm living inside him. Others thought he might have had a malformed brain, possibly damage to the amygdala, which controls hunger and impulse. But those were just guesses. His body didn't just look sick, it looked possessed by hunger itself. But in the end, no one really understood what made Tarrare the way he was. His corpse, like his life, was a mystery. Some scientists have speculated he may have had polyphagia, a condition linked to extreme hunger, or even a damaged amygdala, which controls impulses. Others believe he may have had a parasitic infection, like a tapeworm or extreme hyperthyroidism, causing him to burn through calories at an unimaginable rate. Still, none of these fully explain why he didn't die from eating sharp metal, live animals, or decayed human flesh. Tarrare was a medical enigma, and maybe something even darker. Could it have been a parasite, a tumor, or was Tarrare something science still can't explain? His story doesn't just baffle doctors, it haunts them. Tarrare's story is one of history's darkest riddles. Was he cursed, sick, or something science still can't explain? Dead Pope on trial, the Cadaver Synod. Imagine this: a pope, dead for months, gets dug up, dressed in sacred robes, and dragged into a courtroom to stand trial. Sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? But it really happened. This is the true story of the Cadaver Synod, the trial of a dead pope. This bizarre event was no legend, it was real. Known as the Cadaver Synod, it remains one of the most macabre episodes in all of church history. It's a story of power, revenge, and obsession, where a grudge didn't just survive death, it dug it back up. Pope Formosus had a complicated past. Before becoming pope, he was a bishop of Porto, a man admired for his intellect, but entangled in church politics. He'd been excommunicated once, then reinstated, then elevated to pope. But his actions made enemies, especially in a time when papal politics were blood sport. After his death in 896, his successor, Pope Stephen VI, came to power. And he came with a grudge, one so strong he couldn't let it rest in peace. Under Stephen's orders, Formosus's body was dug up from its tomb. A year after his death, his corpse was bloated, decomposed, but still robed in sacred vestments. It was placed on a throne in the Lateran Basilica, and the Synod began. A deacon stood beside the corpse to speak for him. Meanwhile, Pope Stephen hurled charges of perjury, illegal papacy, and violations of canon law. There was no defense. How could there be? Formosus, dead and silent, sat slumped, while Stephen grew increasingly frenzied, more like a man exercising personal demons than delivering justice. At one point, Stephen shouted directly at the corpse, as if daring it to speak. In the end, Formosus was found guilty. His papacy was declared invalid. The sacred fingers he once used to give blessings were sliced off. His body, now stripped of its robes, was dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. The people of Rome were horrified. Even in an age of brutality, This crossed a line. The public turned on Pope Stephen VI, who was imprisoned and strangled to death shortly afterward. Formosa's body was eventually recovered and reburied in St. Peter's Basilica. The next pope, Theodore II, annulled the Cadaver Synod and restored Formosa's honor. Later popes banned posthumous trials altogether. This wasn't just about religious law. It was a power play, personal vengeance masquerading as justice. A reminder that even the most sacred institutions are not immune to human flaws, fear, pride, and obsession. And in the end, the Cadaver Synod stands as a dark warning of what happens when hatred outlives the man who sparked it. The woman from the hollow ship. Imagine a strange vessel washing ashore in 1803 Japan. A hollow, dome-shaped craft made of metal and glass. Inside sits a woman with fiery red hair, speaking a language no one understands. Clutching a mysterious box she refuses to let go. Was she a castaway, a spy, or something far stranger? Today, we travel back to the remote beaches of Edo period Japan to explore the bizarre case of the Utsurobuni, one of history's most puzzling maritime mysteries. In the early 1800s, Japan was deep in its isolationist era, Sakoku, a time when foreign contact was strictly limited and outsiders were viewed with deep suspicion. It was into this cautious and closed-off world that something inexplicable appeared. The location was Hitachi Province, modern-day Ibaraki Prefecture, along the eastern coast of Japan. Local fishermen spotted something drifting in the water, eventually washing ashore. What they found would baffle everyone who saw it. The craft was like nothing the villagers had ever seen. It was round, like a saucer, with a dome-shaped top and a flat base. Measuring around 3.3 meters high and 5.5 meters wide, it appeared to be made of red lacquered wood and reinforced with metal plates. Windows made of glass or crystal lined the upper part, giving it a strange, almost otherworldly glow. The Japanese called it an Utsurobune, meaning hollow ship. But the vessel wasn't empty. Inside the ship was a young woman, described as around 18 to 20 years old, with pale skin and bright red or white hair, depending on the account. Her eyebrows were also red, and her clothing was unlike anything the villagers recognized. Some said she wore long, layered fabrics with strange patterns. She didn't speak Japanese or any known language, and no one could understand her. But what intrigued people even more was the box she held tightly in her hands. Roughly 60 centimeters long, the woman guarded it fiercely, refusing to let anyone open it or touch it. Some believed it contained the ashes of a deceased lover. Others thought it held secret documents or forbidden technology. And just like that, after much debate, the villagers made a decision. They sent her and the craft back to sea. So, what was this strange event? Historians and folklorists have debated the Utsurobuni story for years. Some say the woman might have been a castaway from Russia or nearby regions, given her appearance and the possibility of foreign writing inside the craft. Others believe the story is pure folklore, passed down and exaggerated with each telling. But then, there are the stranger theories. Some suggest it could have been a sighting of an ancient UFO. The shape of the vessel, metallic, domed and windowed, matches many modern UFO descriptions. The woman's unknown language, mysterious object, and sudden appearance from the sea only fuel the idea that she was something not of this earth. And yet the original accounts, like the Toen Shosetsu and Ume no Chiri, were written not in fantasy collections, but in records that often mixed real events with unusual sightings. The illustrations show a remarkably consistent craft across multiple sources. Was it a warning, a visitation, or just a misunderstood encounter with someone from beyond Japan's tightly sealed borders. Whether it was fact, fiction, or something in between, the Utsurobuni story has endured for over 2 centuries. It's inspired countless anime, manga, UFO theories, and even paranormal documentaries. But what's most chilling about this tale is that it's never been fully explained. And maybe that's what makes it stick. A ship with no anchor in known history. A woman from nowhere, speaking a language no one could understand. And a box whose contents remain a mystery to this day. So, what do you think the villagers found that day? A foreign castaway? An alien traveler? Or just a well-crafted legend? Drop your theories in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. The chilling truth behind Lizzie Borden's murder trial. Most people think they know the story of Lizzie Borden, the axe, the rhyme, the trial. But what if we told you that everything you think you know has been twisted by time, rumors, and fear? This isn't just a tale of a woman accused of butchering her parents. It's about a broken home, hidden motives, and a verdict that still haunts American history. This is the Lizzie Borden story you haven't heard. Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19, 1860, in Fall River, Massachusetts. Her father, Andrew Borden, was wealthy but notoriously frugal, even though he could afford much more. Their home lacked indoor plumbing, despite being surrounded by relatives with far grander homes. Lizzie and her sister Emma lived under strict rules in a house filled with tension. Their stepmother, Abby Borden, was not well liked by the daughters, and the family dynamic was cold at best. Lizzie was active in church and the local community, often teaching Sunday school and hosting charity events. But behind the polished image, resentment simmered. Neighbors would later recall how Lizzie often seemed brisk and cold. She was known to have a temper, especially when discussing her stepmother. Some believe Lizzie viewed Abby as an intruder who replaced the mother she lost at age 2. Emma, older by nearly 10 years, was quiet, obedient, and protective. The sisters shared a bedroom into adulthood, and some believe Emma played more of a maternal role than Abby ever did. There were even whispers among townsfolk that Andrew Borden's tight control over the household bordered on oppressiveness. By 1892, the Borden household was teetering on the edge. A dispute over a piece of real estate Andrew had given to Abby's family triggered a bitter feud. Lizzie and Emma were furious. They saw it as a betrayal, and one that could cost them their inheritance. Emma left town to visit friends just days before the murders, possibly to escape the rising tension. Lizzie stayed behind. On July 31st, 4 days before the murders, she had a heated argument with her father in the kitchen, overheard by the maid Bridget Sullivan. Bridget would later say she'd never seen Lizzie so angry. There were also rumors, quiet but persistent, that Lizzie had a secret romantic relationship with an actress, something scandalous for the time. Some speculate that Andrew found out and threatened to disinherit her. Could this have been the final straw? In the days leading up to the murders, everyone in the Borden home reported being sick. Abby feared someone was trying to poison them, and even visited a doctor. Lizzie, meanwhile, was spotted at a local drugstore attempting to purchase prussic acid, a powerful poison. The clerk testified that she claimed it was for cleaning a sealskin cape, but he refused the sale. That visit, combined with the household illness, sparked a new theory. What if the axe wasn't the first murder attempt? Some modern historians now believe Lizzie may have tried to poison her family before resorting to violence. Others think the sickness was real but unrelated, a coincidence that became deadly context. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, the Borden home became a crime scene. Abby was killed first, sometime between 9 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. She was found upstairs in the guest room, struck 18 times with a hatchet. Her skull was crushed, her face nearly unrecognizable. Andrew returned home around 10:45 a.m. and was murdered while lying on the parlor sofa. He had been hit 10 to 11 times, primarily to the face. One eye had been split in two. Bridget, the maid, was outside washing windows. Lizzie claimed she was in the barn loft looking for fishing equipment, but police found no disturbed dust or footprints in the loft. Her story changed several times, and neighbors later reported seeing her burn a dress in the kitchen stove shortly after the murders. When questioned, Lizzie appeared oddly composed. She denied any involvement, but her evasive answers and calm demeanor only deepened suspicion. The police were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, and the killer would have had to navigate a maze-like interior without leaving blood tracks. The community reacted swiftly. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Bloody deed" and "Woman murderess." Crowds gathered outside the Borden home daily. Reporters from Boston and New York descended on Fall River, turning Lizzie into a household name. Detectives were also suspicious of Bridget. Why didn't she hear anything? Why did she say she was resting in her room during the second murder? Some theorists believe Bridget may have seen something, or even helped, but remained silent out of fear or loyalty. Even the family doctor, Dr. Bowen, came under fire for possibly shielding Lizzie. He was a neighbor and friend of the Borden family, and his testimonies were vague and at times contradictory. Meanwhile, local women were divided. Some believed Lizzie was guilty but brave. Others defended her fiercely, seeing her as a victim of a patriarchal system that didn't understand women with independence. Lizzie's trial began in June 1893 and lasted 13 days. The courtroom was packed daily. Women wore mourning veils. Reporters filled the gallery. The nation was obsessed. The prosecution focused on Lizzie's inconsistent statements, her attempt to buy poison, and the burning of the dress. But they had no eyewitness, no bloody clothes, and no confirmed murder weapon. The defense, led by former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson, painted Lizzie as a God-fearing, respectable woman, incapable of violence. They argued that no woman, especially one of Lizzie's background, could commit such a grisly act. The press was overwhelmingly sympathetic. Headlines like "Innocent until proven guilty" and "Lizzie's dignity shines through" created a media narrative that leaned in her favor. Some even compared her to Joan of Arc. When the skulls of Andrew and Abby were shown in court, Lizzie fainted. That moment became a turning point. Sympathy shifted. The jury, composed entirely of men, deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a not guilty verdict. One juror later remarked, "She doesn't look like a murderer." In many ways, Lizzie's acquittal was less about the evidence and more about what society was willing to believe a woman could or could not do. Despite being cleared in court, Lizzie was never truly free. She and Emma moved to Maplecroft, a large home in the wealthier part of Fall River. Lizzie changed her name to Lisbeth and tried to rebuild her life, but the town never forgave her. She was excluded from church events. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. Rumors followed her everywhere. In 1905, Emma abruptly moved out. Some say Lizzie had become erratic. Others believe Emma discovered something that shook her. Lizzie was accused of shoplifting in 1897, and though the charges didn't stick, the damage to her reputation was irreversible. She died in 1927 of pneumonia, alone and estranged from everyone she once knew. Emma died days later in New Hampshire. They are buried side by side under the name Borden, a name that still chills the air in Fall River. To this day, speculation swirls. Some believe Emma was involved or knew the truth. Others suspect Bridget the maid may have snapped under pressure. A few even blame a mystery man, perhaps an illegitimate child of Andrew's seeking revenge. Modern forensic experts have re-examined the case, pointing out the lack of defensive wounds, the trajectory of the blows, and the psychological profile of the killer. Many now agree the killer likely knew the victims and acted in rage, not impulse. Gender and class played a major role. In the 1890s, a proper lady was not expected to be capable of murder. The corseted, clean image of womanhood did not fit with the savagery of the crime. That mismatch may have helped Lizzie walk free. The story of Lizzie Borden continues to haunt pop culture. The house is now a bed and breakfast that hosts ghost tours. TV movies have depicted her as a killer, a feminist, and even a victim of abuse. Artists and musicians reference her name in everything from goth rock to graphic novels. And of course, there's the rhyme, Lizzie Borden took an axe. It's become part of American folklore, chanted on playgrounds, printed on t-shirts, and used to sell horror. But behind that catchy verse is a complicated, unsolved mystery, and a woman whose story was never as simple as it seemed. So, did Lizzie Borden get away with murder? Or was she the perfect scapegoat in a town ready to blame a woman who didn't fit their mold? The truth might be buried with the hatchet, but one thing is certain. You've never heard the Lizzie Borden story quite like this. The Princes in the Tower, England's darkest mystery. London, 1483. The Tower of London casts its long shadow over the city. Behind its high stone walls, two young boys, heirs to the throne of England, laugh and play. They are surrounded by guards, servants, and tutors. It should be the safest place in the kingdom. And then, they disappear. No fanfare, no announcement, just silence. For over 500 years, their fate has remained one of history's most chilling mysteries. Were they murdered? Hidden? Did one of them escape? This is the real story of Edward and Richard, the princes in the tower, and the ruthless power struggle that may have sealed their doom. Edward V was just 12 years old. His little brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, was only 9. Sons of King Edward IV and Queen Elizabeth Woodville, they were born into one of England's most powerful families during one of its most unstable eras, the Wars of the Roses. Their father, Edward IV, had seized the throne for the House of York and held it against fierce opposition. But in April 1483, he died suddenly. Some say of illness, others hint at poison or overindulgence, leaving young Edward as king in name, but far too young to rule. His mother, Elizabeth Woodville, wanted her son to be crowned quickly to secure the family's power. But many in the nobility distrusted the Woodvilles, seeing them as social climbers who had taken too much influence under Edward IV. Among their biggest critics, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, young Edward's uncle. Gloucester was named Lord Protector in Edward IV's will. That meant he had legal guardianship over the new boy king. He acted swiftly. He intercepted Edward V on his journey to London and took him, gently at first, to the Tower. It wasn't unusual. The Tower was traditionally where monarchs stayed before their coronations, but what followed was anything but traditional. Let's pause here, because this is where things start to take a darker turn. Picture a 12-year-old boy who just lost his father, suddenly taken away from his entourage and placed in a massive fortress under the authority of a man he barely knew. That's not protection, that's a cage. Soon after Edward was placed in the Tower, Richard began consolidating his power. He arrested and executed two of Edward's closest advisors, Earl Rivers, the boy's uncle on his mother's side, and Lord Grey, his half-brother. Both were accused of treason, but it looked more like a calculated move to eliminate the Woodville influence. Elizabeth Woodville fled with her remaining children to sanctuary at Westminster Abbey. But eventually, under pressure and perhaps false promises, she agreed to release Edward's younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, so he could join the king in the Tower. And that's when the world stopped seeing them. Imagine this: two boys locked away in stone chambers, the echo of their footsteps the only sound in those long corridors. Their world, once filled with tutors, laughter, and royal privilege, was reduced to silence and suspicion. Meanwhile, Richard of Gloucester made a stunning move. He claimed that his nephews were illegitimate. A clergyman named Bishop Stillington testified that Edward IV had been pre-contracted to marry another woman before he wed Elizabeth Woodville, making their children, Edward V and his siblings, illegitimate by church law. This allowed Richard to claim the throne for himself. Parliament passed the Titulus Regius, officially disinheriting the princes. On July 6, 1483, Richard was crowned King Richard III. The princes were never seen in public again. At first, there were reports of the boys being seen occasionally within the Tower grounds. Some said they were spotted playing, others that they were in good health. But by late summer, August 1483, they vanished entirely from public view. No official statement was issued. There was no confirmation of their status. The Tower, once a royal residence, had become a tomb of silence. What might those final days have looked like? Maybe Edward tried to stay strong for his younger brother. Maybe they whispered through the dark, wondering why no one had come. Maybe they thought they'd be rescued, but the rescue never came. Rumors began to swirl that the boys had been murdered. Some claimed they were smothered in their sleep. Others whispered they had been stabbed or poisoned. But no proof surfaced. No graves were discovered. No confessions were made. In an era when executions were public and political enemies were paraded through the streets, the silence surrounding the prince's fate was deafening. Their disappearance wasn't just a family tragedy, it was a political earthquake. Many historians believe that Richard III ordered the murders. He had both the motive and the means. With the boys gone, his claim to the throne was uncontested. But killing two children, even in medieval England, it was an act that would stain a king's name forever. And there was never any direct evidence linking Richard to the crime. Others believe the princes may have been killed without Richard's knowledge, perhaps by one of his loyal supporters, such as Sir James Tyrrell, seeking to win favor or eliminate a threat. Tyrrell later confessed under torture, but his statement is unreliable, and no bodies were found to confirm it. There's also the theory that they survived beyond Richard's reign. After Richard III's death in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth, Henry Tudor took the crown as Henry VII. If the boys were still alive, they posed a threat to his rule. Could he have had them killed in secret? Then came the curious case of Perkin Warbeck. In the 1490s, he appeared in Europe claiming to be Prince Richard, the younger of the two lost boys. He was welcomed by royal courts across the continent and even led a failed invasion of England. Henry VII eventually captured him and had him executed. But the resemblance and knowledge Warbeck displayed left some wondering. Could he have been telling the truth? Warbeck's story isn't just a footnote. It's a window into how desperate England was for answers. His very existence relit the fire of the prince's mystery. And the fact that so many believed him perhaps even wanted to believe, says something deeper. Maybe people never truly trusted the official story. In 1674, workers demolishing a staircase in the tower discovered a wooden chest beneath the rubble. Inside were two small skeletons. They were moved to Westminster Abbey and buried under a marble slab. For centuries, they were believed to be the missing princes, but no DNA testing has been allowed. And in 2024, the mystery deepened. A researcher at the National Archives uncovered a document written by someone in Richard III's household, hinting that the boy's disappearance may have been carried out under someone's private orders. Perhaps Richard didn't know. Perhaps he did. The document raised more questions than answers. The mystery of the princes in the tower has captivated historians, playwrights, and conspiracy theorists for centuries. William Shakespeare portrayed Richard III as a hunchbacked monster who would stop at nothing for the crown, including murdering his own nephews. But Shakespeare was writing under the Tudor regime, and his work served their political narrative. Modern historians have taken a closer look. Some argue Richard was no saint, but not the villain he was made out to be. Others believe he was every bit the calculating usurper his enemies claimed. What we know for sure is this: two boys entered the Tower of London in 1483. They were never seen again, and their absence shaped the course of English history. Had Edward V become king, the Wars of the Roses might have ended differently. The Tudors might never have risen. The English Reformation, Henry VIII's 6 wives, Elizabeth I's Golden Age, none of it might have happened, all because of a disappearance in the dark corners of a stone fortress. So much blood has been spilled in the name of power, but it's the blood that vanished without a trace, that still whispers through the halls of the tower. So what do you think happened to the princes in the tower? Were they victims of a ruthless uncle, pawns in a larger game of power, or did one of them escape to write a secret history no one ever uncovered? Leave your thoughts in the comments. 5 inventors who vanished without a trace. There's something eerie about a vanishing. Not a murder, not a car crash, but a person who simply disappears. 1 minute, they're alive, breathing, thinking, inventing. The next, their name is in the papers. Their face is on a missing persons list. Their body is nowhere to be found. And when the person who vanishes is someone important, someone brilliant, it makes you wonder, what did they know? What were they building? And who might have wanted them gone? These are not your average disappearances. These are 5 inventors, each on the verge of changing the world, who walked into the unknown and never came back. Number 5, Rudolf Diesel. Rudolf Diesel had always been a man of precision. In his world, things had to fit. The numbers, the pressure valves, the engines, everything had to run like clockwork. He was born in Paris, 1858, to German immigrants. His childhood was not gentle. His family was poor, and young Rudolf suffered a near-fatal illness that would scar his lungs for life. But he survived, and he learned to survive through obsession. Diesel wasn't flashy, he wasn't charming, but he had a mind that worked like one of his future machines, methodical, driven, unstoppable. While other engineers tinkered with steam, Diesel imagined something better, cleaner, more efficient. In 1897, after years of failures and near breakdowns, he unveiled it, the diesel engine. Not flashy, not fast, but strong. It was an engine that could run on peanut oil, that could outlast gas or steam, that could drive ships and trains and tanks for decades. And suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of him. But by 1913, Rudolf Diesel was not a man at peace. He was exhausted, broke, caught in a storm of debt, lawsuits, and politics. He was under pressure to sell his patent rights. The German military wanted control. The British had interest. Industrial titans circled like sharks. On September 29, 1913, Diesel boarded the SS Dresden, a steamer bound from Belgium to England. He had a leather briefcase with him. Inside it, blueprints, personal letters, and a diary. He ate dinner with the ship's officers, smiled, talked about business, said goodnight around 10 p.m., went to his cabin, laid out his nightshirt on the bed, took off his watch, folded it beside the wash basin, then locked the door behind him. He was never seen again. The next morning, the steward knocked. No answer. The cabin was exactly as he'd left it. Neat, organized, the bed untouched, the watch still ticking, but no Rudolf Diesel. A search of the ship turned up nothing. The ocean was calm that night. No signs of a fall. No one had heard a splash. Just gone. 10 days later, fishermen off the coast of Norway pulled a bloated body from the water. It had no identification. The face was unrecognizable, but the clothes, they matched what Diesel had been wearing when he boarded the ship. The body was tossed back into the sea. What happened to him? Some say he jumped, that the stress, the debts, the fear of failure was too much. His diary that night had a small X marked next to the date, something he reportedly did when he felt his life was about to take a major turn. But not everyone believes it was suicide. Diesel was on his way to a meeting with the British Navy, possibly to help them convert their fleet to diesel fuel. Germany was watching. The timing, just 1 year before World War I, was suspicious. There were rumors he had refused to sell out to the Germans, that he was planning to sell to their enemies. Some believe he was thrown overboard by agents who wanted to silence him. Others say he staged the whole thing, disappeared to start over under a new name. But Diesel didn't seem like the type. He was tired. He was stretched thin. But he was also a man who believed in finishing things. Still, no one really knows. His invention would go on to power a generation. His engine was used in submarines, in warships, in generators across the globe, and yet the man who gave the world the diesel engine disappeared into the ocean without a sound. What happened that night on the SS Dresden? Maybe it was suicide, maybe it was sabotage, or maybe the cost of changing the world is that you don't get to live in it. Number 4, Ettore Majorana. Ettore Majorana was a genius, not in the really smart kind of way, but in the terrifying, otherworldly sense. The kind of mind that made even Einstein stop and say, "This man is beyond me." Born in Sicily in 1906, Ettore was quiet, intense, awkward in crowds, and constantly lost in thought. His classmates used to say he saw equations the way artists saw color. In his early 20s, he was already working with Enrico Fermi. Yes, that Fermi, the man who would go on to build the first nuclear reactor. But even then, there was something off about Ettore. He could solve problems no one else could touch, but he often refused to publish. He once cracked a complex physics problem, handed the solution to a colleague, and walked away like it was nothing. He didn't want credit. He didn't want fame. It was as if he didn't want to be known at all. By the time he was in his early 30s, Majorana had become something of a ghost in Italy's physics circles. Brilliant, reclusive, unpredictable. His letters grew strange. His mood darkened. He started talking about the burden of knowledge, about things humanity wasn't ready for. And then, in March of 1938, he vanished. The last few days of his life were a puzzle in themselves. He withdrew a large sum of money from the bank. He sent conflicting letters, one to his family that read like a suicide note, and another that reversed it entirely. "Don't worry, I've reconsidered." Then he boarded a boat from Palermo to Naples. And just like that, gone. No one saw him disembark. No luggage, no body, no clues. Fermi was stunned. He told colleagues that Majorana didn't disappear like an ordinary man. He vanished like a cloud, dissolving into thin air. Theories exploded. Some said he jumped into the sea, that his tortured genius finally cracked under the weight of his thoughts. But others weren't so sure. One theory said he'd fled to a monastery, that he'd renounced the world and hidden away as a silent monk. That one comes from a writer named Leonardo Sciascia, who claimed the Catholic Church had secretly sheltered him. No proof, just whispers. Another theory said Majorana had defected to Argentina, or even to the Soviet Union, that his knowledge of atomic energy was too dangerous to fall into any one country's hands. And then things got really weird. In the 1950s, over a decade after his disappearance, several people claimed to have seen him. A professor in Venezuela said a man who looked exactly like Majorana had been living under a false name in Caracas. The man denied it. But when shown a photo of the missing physicist, he went pale. More sightings followed. Different countries, different stories, always the same reaction. Recognition, discomfort, denial. There's even a theory that Majorana never got on the boat at all, that he paid someone to take his place, that he staged the whole thing. Why? Maybe he feared what he knew. Maybe he wanted to stop the atomic arms race before it began. Or maybe he just wanted to disappear. Whatever happened, no one ever found his body. His family never got answers. His work, particularly his research into neutrinos and antimatter, would go on to become foundational in quantum mechanics. But the man himself, he became a legend. The Italian government officially declared him dead in 2011, 73 years after he disappeared. Think about that. A man who might have helped build the bomb walked away from history and may have lived quietly while the rest of the world burned. What would you do if you knew how to split atoms, how to break the universe in half? Would you share it with the world? Or would you walk into the sea and let it all go? Number 3, Louis Le Prince. In the history of filmmaking, there's one name that always stands out. Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park. The man who gave the world the light bulb, the phonograph, and, according to most textbooks, the motion picture camera. But what if I told you he wasn't first? What if I told you the true father of film vanished before he ever got to claim his title? His name was Louis Le Prince. Born in France in 1841, Le Prince was an artist and an inventor, a dreamer with a fascination for light and movement. He had a background in photography and chemistry, skills he used to try something no one else had ever managed to pull off: capturing motion on film. In the late 1880s, working quietly in a small workshop in Leeds, England, Le Prince did something astonishing. He created a single-lens motion picture camera, and it worked. The footage still exists. A short clip called Round Hay Garden Scene, filmed in 1888. 4 people walking in a garden, smiling, laughing, alive in motion. Just a few seconds long, but enough to prove it. Louis Le Prince had captured moving pictures years before Edison. He was on the verge of something huge. In 1890, he made plans to travel to America to showcase his invention. He'd already been in contact with Edison's representatives. His wife and children were in New York, waiting for him. His camera and equipment were packed. He was going to file patents, secure investors, and become a household name. And then he disappeared. On September 16th, 1890, Le Prince boarded a train in Dijon, France, heading for Paris. His brother waved him off at the station. He never arrived. The train made it to Paris, but Le Prince wasn't on it. There were no reports of him getting off early. No body was found on the tracks. No sign of violence. Nothing missing. Just gone. The last person to see him alive was his brother. And that's where the mystery begins. Some believed he committed suicide, that he felt overwhelmed or mentally unstable. But by all accounts, Le Prince was energized, excited even. He was on the brink of fame. He was days away from becoming the most important figure in cinema. Others whispered about family drama, that maybe his brother had something to do with it. Inheritance disputes, money, but no evidence ever turned up. And then there's the big theory, the one that refuses to die. Thomas Edison. After Le Prince's disappearance, Edison filed his own patent for a motion picture camera. When Le Prince's family challenged him in court, armed with Louis' footage and early designs, Edison fought hard and won. Without Le Prince to testify, there was no contest. The father of motion pictures was erased from history. Was it a coincidence? Maybe. But here's something strange. In 2003, a photo was discovered in the archives of the Paris police. It was from 1890, the same year Le Prince vanished. It showed the corpse of a man pulled from the Seine River. The face was bloated, but the features, they bore an eerie resemblance to Le Prince. There was no record of the body ever being identified. So what happened? Was Le Prince murdered before he could challenge Edison's empire? Was he thrown from the train and dumped in the river? Was he the victim of a mugging? Or did he stumble into something darker, a conspiracy to bury his invention? No one knows, and maybe no one ever will. What we do know is this: Louis Le Prince filmed the world's first motion picture, and the world forgot him. Not because he failed, not because his invention didn't work, but because he vanished, just as history was about to remember his name. Number 2, Albert Johann Petersen. Some disappearances happen in crowded cities, others in the depths of war. But this one happened on still waters, beneath a grey sky, somewhere along the quiet fjords of Norway. And to this day, no one knows why. Albert Johann Petersen wasn't a celebrity. He didn't invent a machine that changed the world. But in his field, in the world of chemistry and metallurgy, he was a star, a pioneer, a man whose discoveries could shape the steel and carbide industries for generations. He was born in Switzerland in 1863, but built his legacy in Norway, where he worked closely with the Odda Smelting Company. He was brilliant, respected, and, by all accounts, obsessed with the science of heat, pressure, and transformation. But in August of 1914, something shifted. War had just erupted across Europe. Germany was invading Belgium. Alliances were forming. The world was unraveling. And Petersen, he seemed distracted. On the morning of August 18th, 1914, Petersen boarded a coastal steamer, the DS Ullensvang. It was a small passenger ship headed north, sailing from the village of Odda toward Bergen. He greeted the crew. He had a cabin. He was seen on deck. Then, by the next morning, he was gone. Just gone. The ship hadn't docked. It hadn't hit rough water. No alarms had sounded. But when the steward knocked on Petersen's cabin to deliver breakfast, there was no answer. They opened the door. The bed was made. His suitcase sat neatly by the wall. His coat hung on the hook. But he wasn't there. And he hadn't gotten off at any previous stop. There were no witnesses, no sounds in the night, no signs of distress. Just another man vanished. The crew searched the ship. They radioed ahead to Bergen. No one had seen him. The fjords that morning were calm, mirror-like. If he had gone overboard, someone should have noticed. But no one did. Investigators were called in. They questioned the passengers, interviewed the crew, checked every log and report. Nothing. No note, no illness, no debt, no enemies. Nothing to suggest he'd taken his own life, or that someone had reason to take his. And here's the strange part. Peterson wasn't just any scientist. He was one of the few people at the time working with a very specific process, producing carbide using an electric arc furnace. It was dangerous, expensive, and incredibly valuable during wartime. With the First World War just beginning, the value of such technology was skyrocketing. Steel, explosives, industrial materials, every country needed them. So the question hung heavy in the air. Was Peterson simply a victim of a freak accident? Did he slip overboard unnoticed in the still of the night? Or was it something else? Some suspected foul play. Industrial espionage wasn't unheard of in those days. Rival companies were known to sabotage each other. And governments, they had their own agendas. Others believed he fled, that the war, the pressure, the knowledge he carried, it became too much. Maybe he left everything behind and vanished into the mountains, started over with a new name, hid from a world on fire. But again, no trace, no body, no sightings, no whispers, just one man, one morning, gone. In the end, Albert Johann Peterson became more than a missing person. He became a ghost story in the world of science. A reminder that even the quiet ones, even those who don't crave fame or fortune, can vanish without warning, without reason, without closure. Maybe the sea took him. Maybe someone else did. Or maybe he just chose to disappear. Number 1, William Cantello. In the late 1870s, in the coastal city of Southampton, England, there was a man who worked beneath a pub. Not drank, worked. His name was William Cantello, and he wasn't just some backroom tinkerer. He was an inventor, an engineer, a man with big ideas and no time for small talk. He set up his workshop underneath the Old Tower Inn, and what he was building there would change the future of warfare. If anyone had asked what the strange noises were coming from below, the clanking, the echoing bursts of machinery, they might have guessed he was working on plumbing, or maybe some kind of industrial pump. But it wasn't that. Cantello had invented something terrifying, a machine gun. Long before Hiram Maxim would go on to invent and patent the weapon that would dominate battlefields for decades, Cantello had already developed a prototype for a rapid-firing, recoil-powered gun. His sons helped him test it. The report said it could fire faster and farther than anything seen at the time. And then, just as he began looking for buyers, he disappeared. One day, in the early 1880s, Cantello withdrew a large sum of money from the bank, packed up some equipment, left without a word, and never came back. His family waited days, then weeks, then months. They hired private detectives. They searched ports and rail stations. Nothing. His workshop was abandoned. The prototype gun was missing. It was like he'd been erased. Years passed. Then one day, his sons were flipping through a newspaper and stopped cold. There, staring back at them from the page, was a photograph. The man in the image had a thick beard, a serious look. He was listed as a successful inventor, now living in America. His name, Hiram Maxim. The resemblance was uncanny. Same eyes, same building, same nose. The family was stunned. They were convinced it was him. William Cantello had changed his name and reinvented himself across the Atlantic. They wrote letters, begged for answers. Finally, they scraped together enough money to send one of the sons to New York to confront this Maxim. And that's where things got even weirder. When they met him in person, the resemblance was still there. Too close to be coincidence, they thought. The son asked, point blank, "Are you William Cantello?" Maxim laughed, denied it, insisted he'd always been Hiram Maxim, that he was born in Maine, that he had no idea who they were. He even provided documentation. And yet, the way he spoke, the way he moved, it haunted them. Here was a man with the exact same invention, the exact same ideas, the same unique mechanism, the same timing, but no connection, really. To this day, no one can say for certain whether Maxim was Cantello. The official story is no, Hiram Maxim was a real person, with family, birth records, and a documented past. Historians have traced his lineage, his inventions, but the Cantello family never believed it. They believed their father had faked his own death, changed his identity, and sold his invention under a new name to escape something. Maybe debt, maybe failure, or maybe something darker. There's a rumor, a small one, never confirmed, that Cantello had grown paranoid, that he feared his invention would fall into the wrong hands, that governments had approached him, that he was being watched. It sounds far-fetched, until you remember that the Maxim gun would go on to become one of the most widely used killing machines in human history. It changed warfare forever, and its true origin still debated. William Cantello stepped into history's shadow, and someone else came out the other side. So the question remains, did William Cantello disappear, or did he simply rebrand? 5 men, 5 minds ahead of their time, each one balancing on the edge of discovery. And then just like that, gone. No car crash, no long illness, no goodbye, just silence. Maybe that's the cost of being a visionary. When you see too far ahead, when you know too much, or create too quickly, maybe the world pushes back. Rudolf Diesel, swallowed by the sea before he could change the face of naval power. Ettore Majorana, brilliant enough to predict atomic destruction, and possibly wise enough to run from it. Louis Le Prince, robbed of recognition, erased before cinema could crown him its father. Albert Peterson, vanishing into the fog as a world war ignited around him. And William Cantello, who may have walked away from his name and into history under someone else's. Some of these men left clues, others left nothing, but all of them left questions. And maybe that's the most haunting part. It's not just where they went, it's what the world lost when they disappeared. A better fuel, a better understanding of the universe, a different origin for the movies we love, safer technology, an end to war, or a new beginning. We'll never know, because these men didn't just vanish, they took the future with them. What do you think happened? Were these disappearances just tragic coincidences, or were they erased intentionally by people who stood to gain from their absence? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you love the West Ham vanishings, London, 1880s. The East End is alive with clattering carts, shipyard smoke, and the cries of children dodging between workhouses and market stalls. But in one corner of this crowded maze, West Ham, something far more sinister was happening. Young girls started vanishing, one by one. No warning, no witnesses. Some were never seen again. Others turned up in horrifying conditions. And unlike the infamous Jack the Ripper murders, these crimes were swept into silence. This is the forgotten tale of the West Ham vanishings, a haunting series of unsolved disappearances and murders that gripped East London from 1881 to 1889 and remain a mystery to this day. It began on April 16th, 1881. 14-year-old Mary Seward left her home at 98 West Road, Plaistow, headed out on a simple errand. She never came back. Her family searched frantically. Neighbors joined the hunt. The local paper reported the entire district was much disturbed. People were terrified. How does a young girl vanish in broad daylight? Then, an eerie clue. A blue dress was found in West Ham Park, with the buttons carefully cut off. A strange detail, deliberate, almost ritualistic, but no sign of Mary herself. She was never found. No body, no suspects, no answers. Just weeks later, Eliza Carter, age 12, disappeared under equally bizarre circumstances. She was last seen heading home from school. Then, she was gone. But days later, she suddenly reappeared briefly, just long enough to tell her classmates something unsettling. "The fairies took me. I can't go home." Then she vanished again, completely. Police scoured the area. And once again, in West Ham Park, a blue dress was found. Buttons missing, just like Mary Seward's. Was it the same person? A serial predator? Or something worse? Something organized? Around this time, a British Army major stationed in Portsmouth came forward with a disturbing story. He claimed he saw a girl being dragged by a hideous old woman through the streets, but something felt off. It was like the woman might have been in disguise, even possibly a man dressed to appear older. The girl was terrified. The scene stayed with him. Was this one of the missing West Ham girls? The police never confirmed the sighting, but it added fuel to the rumors. Was a predator using disguises? Were multiple people involved? Nearly a decade later, in 1890, tragedy struck again. This time with a name we wouldn't forget. Amelia Jeffs, age 14, went out to buy fish and potatoes for dinner on a foggy January evening. She never returned. Her parents were frantic. The entire neighborhood helped search. For 2 weeks, there was nothing. Then, on Valentine's Day, police kicked in the door of a small, unoccupied house on Portway. Inside, hidden in a cupboard, was Amelia's body, which had been there for a while. She had been killed and thrown away like garbage. The owner of the house, a local builder named Joseph Roberts. He and his father had been working on that very property. Both had keys. Suspicious, yes, but back then, without forensics, there just wasn't enough to hold them. The case fizzled. No trial, no justice. Over 18 years, at least 6 girls from the same area, Plaistow, Stratford, West Ham, vanished. Most were between 5 and 15 years old. All had gone out on simple errands. None were wealthy. Most were alone. Some were never seen again. Others were found violated, strangled, or mutilated. Details repeated. Blue dresses, missing buttons, near West Ham Park, empty houses, and sightings of strange figures, always around the time of the disappearances. The police were overwhelmed, newspapers distracted by Jack the Ripper. And for the poor girls of East London, no one seemed to care. In August 1882, another girl, Clara Sutton, disappeared on her way home from school. Her case barely made headlines. Like Mary and Eliza, she simply vanished. Then, in 1883, a chilling clue. Postal workers on Goswell Road opened a heavy, unclaimed box. Inside, a teenage girl's corpse, wrapped in cloth, body crushed. Was it Clara or another victim? No one ever identified the body. The box was quickly buried, the case forgotten. Some believed Joseph Roberts was the killer. He worked alone in empty homes. He had access. Dr. Jan Bonderson, a criminologist, later linked him to other disturbing crimes in nearby Walthamstow. Others thought this was organized trafficking. Poor girls kidnapped and sold into child labor, or worse, shipped abroad to Belgium or Holland. There were whispers of this, even one girl allegedly traced to Belgium, though nothing confirmed. A third theory, a Ripper-style killer who targeted preteen and teenage girls, someone with a specific sick pattern and the cunning to vanish without a trace. The West Ham vanishings stopped abruptly in 1899. No new cases, just silence. Did the killer die? Was he jailed on an unrelated charge? Did he move and continue elsewhere, like Walthamstow, where similar crimes appeared in the early 1900s? We don't know, but one thing's certain, nothing changed in West Ham. No sweeping arrests, no grand closure. The evil just stopped. Today, 126 Portway, the house where Amelia Jeffs was found, still stands. But most of the area looks different, modernized, paved over. The memories buried with the girls. The Ripper gets all the headlines, but West Ham had its own shadow. And unlike the Ripper's victims, these girls weren't sex workers or adults. They were children, innocent, alone, forgotten. We may never know who did it. A serial killer, a trafficker, a shadow in the fog. But one thing haunts West Ham more than anything else. We stopped asking. And in the silence, evil thrives. You've just watched the very first entry in the Midnight Ledger, a collection of history's strangest and darkest tales, remastered and re-edited for this new series. If you enjoyed these stories, stay tuned. Each episode will bring you longer, bingeable journeys into the bizarre corners of the past, where truth is stranger than fiction. Subscribe and keep the ledger open, because this is only the beginning.